This despicable human being, he's stupid as well as being ill-tempered. You know, those aren't my words because I would never call Donald Trump ill-tempered. This despicable human being is how the Republican leader of the United States Senate in 2020, Mitch McConnell, described Donald Trump in an oral history after Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential election. In late December of 2020, Mitch McConnell said, "He's stupid," as if it was a known fact, like planet Earth is round, something beyond dispute. This despicable human being. Stupid does not equal despicable. Sometimes Donald Trump can just be stupid, like when he's talking about tariffs. But when Donald Trump manifests, in Mitch McConnell's words, as this despicable human being, his stupidity is the least of what is so despicable about him. And so this weekend, this despicable human being became the first president of the United States to say, "I'm glad," when a good and faithful servant of the United States died. Robert Mueller was everything Donald Trump could never be: smart, highly educated, wise, and faithful. Faithful to his one and only wife, faithful to his two daughters, faithful to all of the oaths he took as a United States Marine, a federal prosecutor, FBI director, and faithful to his country. Donald Trump's deep and irreversible perversion blinds him to human decency. He does not know what it is. He does not know how to imitate it. And so because Robert Mueller served as the first special prosecutor to investigate Donald Trump in his first term as president, and because Robert Mueller successfully proved that Vladimir Putin and the Russian government did indeed interfere in the 2016 presidential election to harm Hillary Clinton and help Donald Trump, and because Robert Mueller sent Donald Trump's campaign manager to prison and mounted other successful prosecutions against Donald Trump's associates, when Robert Mueller died on Friday at age 81, Donald Trump said, "Good, I'm glad." Donald Trump is far less educated than the average high school American history student, not to mention the AP history students. And so Donald Trump has no idea that no president before him had ever said anything like that. Donald Trump doesn't know that Richard Nixon said nothing when Leon Jaworski died. Leon Jaworski was the special Watergate prosecutor who helped drive the investigation of Republican President Richard Nixon to the point that Richard Nixon was forced to resign the presidency and accept a pardon from his vice president, Gerald Ford, when Gerald Ford took the oath of office as president, so that Richard Nixon could not be prosecuted by Leon Jaworski after resigning the presidency. Leon Jaworski led a prosecution team that convicted 48 members of Richard Nixon's administration, most of whom were put in prison, including Richard Nixon's White House chief of staff and his White House counsel and his attorney general. Leon Jaworski completely destroyed Richard Nixon's life. And when Leon Jaworski died, Richard Nixon did not issue a public statement saying, "Good, I'm glad," because Richard Nixon, who was correctly judged to be a despicable human being eventually by most Americans, at least knew what basic human decency looks like. And Richard Nixon knew that he should have nothing to say publicly about the death of Leon Jaworski. Donald Trump was in his 20s when Leon Jaworski was the most famous prosecutor in the world going after the President of the United States, and Donald Trump was in his 30s when Leon Jaworski died in 1982. Donald Trump was there for all of that. But because Donald Trump is not educable, he learned nothing from Richard Nixon's reaction to the death of his special prosecutor, the special prosecutor who completely destroyed Richard Nixon's life. And so historians have yet another marker to prove which of these two human beings was worse, Richard Nixon or Donald Trump. Aside from judging them as presidents, historians will have no difficulty judging which one was the more despicable human being. Donald Trump's vice president, James David Vance, ducked the death of Robert Mueller on social media and said nothing. It was the vice president who said that anyone who would say a negative word about Charlie Kirk after he was killed had to be, quote, a disgusting person and deserved to be fired from their jobs in private enterprise and in government. If that formulation applies, then it certainly should apply to any disgusting person who supports what Donald Trump said about Robert Mueller. The most incompetent and lying Secretary of Treasury in history, who seems to believe he is good on Sunday morning television, such that he continues to go on to humiliate and debase himself every Sunday, demonstrated his rank ignorance yesterday when asked about Donald Trump's despicable statement about Robert Mueller.
I think it's appropriate for the President of the United States to celebrate the death of an American citizen, someone who's a Bronze Star, Purple Heart recipient and who served in Vietnam?
Kristen, I was with the President in the green room at Davos, and there was a video playing of what may have been an illegal raid on his home at Mar-a-Lago. They are going through his wife's wardrobe, and I watched the look in his eye, and I think that neither one of us can understand what has been done to the president and to his family.
What a raving fool. What a clown. Couple of things. First of all, what was done to Richard Nixon by special prosecutors was much, much worse than what happened to Donald Trump. And Robert Mueller closed his investigation of Donald Trump 3 years before the FBI's totally legal raid of Donald Trump's residence to retrieve classified material for which Donald Trump was charged with federal crimes by a different special prosecutor, who the oblivious Scott Bessent, the lying Scott Bessent, doesn't seem to know is named Jack Smith. While he was at it, the Treasury Secretary humiliated himself as a military strategist, saying, quote, sometimes you have to escalate to de-escalate. Needless to say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Lindsey Graham went from calling Donald Trump, quote, a jackass when he was running against Donald Trump for president in 2016, to playing Donald Trump's jackass on TV, as he did in utterly despicable style yesterday. Senator Lindsey Graham served in the Air Force as a lawyer, far from any combat. And yesterday, before Donald Trump announced his panicked retreat in Iran this morning, Lindsey Graham urged Donald Trump, who avoided military service during the war that Robert Mueller served in, to send in the Marines to seize Karg Island and run it.
We got 2 Marine expeditionary units sailing to this island. We did Iwo Jima. We can do this.
We. The United States Marines fought the Battle of Iwo Jima 10 years before Lindsey Graham was born in the last year of World War II. The United States military suffered 7,000 deaths in the Battle of Iwo Jima, 7,000 killed in action in that one battle in the last year of World War II, 10 years before Lindsey Graham was born. That is more killed in action than the entire Afghanistan and Iraq wars combined. We did Iwo Jima, says the cowardly Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham was rightly attacked for that statement, including by Republican members of the House of Representatives who are brave enough to attack the rantings of Lindsey Graham, but not Donald Trump. And everyone on Wall Street knows Donald Trump is going to lie his way out of it by claiming at some point that he has won everything he wanted to win in his war in Iran, with negotiations or without negotiations. Donald Trump will not achieve any kind of peace deal with Iran that is better than the nuclear deal negotiated by Vietnam combat veteran and President Obama's Secretary of State John Kerry, who was a high school hockey teammate of Robert Mueller's. And so Donald Trump enters the fourth week of his war, the most expensive war in the history of the world, as lost as he was in the first week. And when asked today who would control the crucial Strait of Hormuz shipping lanes in his imagined negotiation with Iran, Donald Trump actually said, me. Me and the Ayatollah. Quote, me and the Ayatollah. And with that, no stupider thing has ever been said about the outcome of a war by a president of the United States. Donald Trump knows that Wall Street has a phrase for his retreats on tariffs and now on war. Wall Street calls it taco. Trump always chickens out. And mindful of the reputation he has earned on Wall Street for chickening out on his own threats, including his threat to commit a war crime of bombing of Iran 2 days ago, which he retreated from today, bombing civilian targets, when Donald Trump was describing his imagined negotiations with Iran to reporters this morning, he said, quote, they called, I didn't call, they called, end quote. Such is the goofy insecurity of the man who knows he stands accused of always chickening out. They called, I didn't call, they called. His exact words. Before he became Donald Trump's pet, Senator Lindsey Graham had this thought about the person Mitch McConnell called this despicable human being.
And you know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell.